Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe my channel. I was standing barefoot on cool white marble in the bridal suite at Halcyon House, my dress half zipped, the silk lining whispering against my legs, when my mother slapped a thick cream envelope down on the vanity hard enough to rattle the glass perfume bottles. The bulbs around the mirror flooded everything in a theatrical gold that made her diamonds flash and her expression look even sharper. My father moved to the door without saying a word. One hand braced on the brass handle, shoulders squared like he was guarding a crime scene instead of his daughter on her wedding day. My brother Ryan leaned against the window in a slate gray tuxedo I knew he couldn't afford, rolling a toothpick from one side of his mouth to the other while my makeup artist froze with a powder brush in midair. Behind them, my maid of honor, Maya Patel, stood perfectly still with my bouquet in both hands, the white roses trembling just once before she tightened her grip. "Sign it now," my mother said, voice clipped and bright like she was discussing a seating chart. "Or I walk downstairs and tell Adrian's family exactly where your wedding money came from." My name is Natalie Claire Mercer. I'm 33. And this is the story of how I let my family believe I was still their obedient monthly paycheck right up until the morning I took everything they'd built with my money and made them sign it back. For 4 years before that morning, I sent my parents $2,000 on the first of every month. Not because they demanded it at first. Not openly. It started after my father's second back surgery, when he told me standing for too long made his spine feel like hot wire. My mother called crying from their kitchen in St. Louis, said the mortgage was manageable, the prescriptions were not, and then corrected herself in that soft, weary tone she used when she wanted to sound noble. "We're not asking for survival money, Natalie. We just want to live comfortably. We've worked hard all our lives. We shouldn't have to count every grocery receipt." I was 29 then, newly promoted to senior compliance analyst at a risk advisory firm in Chicago, working 60-hour weeks under fluorescent office lighting, living in a one-bedroom on North Dearborn, eating takeout over spreadsheets, and making more money than anyone in my family ever had. $2,000 a month felt like the kind of thing a good daughter should do. The first transfer was marked "for home plus meds." The second was "whatever you need." By month 6, my mother had renamed the account in our shared banking portal Comfort Fund, with a little leaf icon next to it, as if we were running a boutique wellness plan instead of quietly subsidizing their life. I sent it anyway. I sent it when my mother said inflation was unforgiving. I sent it when my father said the physical therapy clinic had changed their coverage. I sent it when Ryan's latest restaurant job fell through because management was toxic. I sent it when my mother insisted she would never ask if it wasn't necessary, which was how she asked for everything. Christmas, dental work, new tires, a leaking water heater, the dog's medication, an insurance deductible, a patio repair. Never dramatic. Never desperate. Just constant. A drip against stone. Then I met Adrian Cole. He was 36, an architect with the kind of calm that made rooms reorganize themselves around him. We met at a charity design gala in River North after I corrected a donor's understanding of a compliance report he was loudly misquoting. Adrian laughed into his whiskey glass and said, "I don't know what was colder, your tone or his expression." I liked him immediately. My mother did not. She smiled at him the first time they met, but I watched her eyes doing inventory. His tailored navy suit. His old money surname. The slim watch at his wrist. The quiet confidence that didn't perform. My mother always liked men she could read, and Adrian was polished glass. My father was more direct. He shook Adrian's hand too long, then asked where his family was from, what his parents did, whether he believed couples should combine finances, the traditional way. Ryan just asked if Adrian had season tickets to anything. By the time Adrian proposed on a private terrace at the Langford Hotel with the skyline behind us in blue winter light, my family had already begun treating my life like a merger they were entitled to negotiate. My mother wanted to know whether Adrian owned property. My father asked whether there would be a prenuptial agreement. Ryan, who had borrowed money from me 19 separate times and repaid me once with a $6 coffee gift card, actually said, "Don't disappear into rich people world on us." I should have heard the warning in that. Instead, I kept sending the money. What changed wasn't one dramatic discovery. It was the pattern. That was my profession after all. I made a living spotting inconsistencies buried under ordinary language. Around 8 months before the wedding, I noticed my mother complain about choosing between medications the same week she posted a photo on Facebook from the terrace at Brasserie Vert. wearing a camel cashmere coat I knew cost more than a mortgage payment. 2 weeks after telling me Dad's pain specialist had raised fees, she mentioned in passing that Ryan had finally found his footing helping launch a hospitality brand. My father said they were staying in more, yet their card showed valet charges in Clayton, then a furniture store in Ladue, then a recurring payment to a luxury apartment building I knew Ryan had once toured. I didn't accuse anyone. I just turned on alerts. The account was in my name as sender, theirs as receiver, and because I had set up the automatic transfers years before, I still had view access. Not full control. Just visibility. Enough to watch the money leave my checking account in Chicago and land, warm and obedient, in their so-called comfort fund in St. Louis. Enough to see what happened next. The first transfer out of that account each month went to my father's pharmacy, usually a few $100s. The second went to their mortgage, though only partial. The third went with almost religious consistency to Blackbird Social LLC. Ryan's company. Not a company really. A shell with a logo. A hospitality consulting brand that operated out of a co-working space, posted black and white mood boards on Instagram, and burned through cash like it was kindling. My $2,000 a month was not buying my parents' comfort. It was funding Ryan's illusions. I told myself there was an explanation. A temporary bridge. Maybe they were helping him while embarrassed to admit it. Maybe my mother thought if I knew Ryan was involved, I'd cut the transfers off, which was true. So I kept watching. What I found made explanation impossible. Within 6 weeks I had a clean ledger. My monthly transfers were being split between my parents' real expenses, Ryan's rent at a luxury building called the Meridian Lofts, lease payments on a BMW 5 Series, and vendor invoices for Blackbird Social. Then I found the state hardship application. My mother had complained on the phone that paperwork for a property tax relief program was insulting, so I asked to look it over under the pretense of helping. She emailed me the PDF. On page 3, under Outside Financial Support, she had checked no. On page 4, under Household Dependents Supported by Applicant, Ryan was listed as residing in the family home and receiving support due to employment instability. None of that matched the transfers. None of it matched the lease. I still said nothing. Instead, I made copies. Quietly. Methodically. I exported statements. I downloaded PDFs. I saved voicemail transcripts. I set rules in my inbox. I labeled folders by month and color-coded discrepancies in a spreadsheet that grew longer than my wedding guest list. Then 3 months before the wedding, the trap became visible. Ryan called me on a Tuesday evening, too casual, asking whether Adrian and I planned to buy a house after the honeymoon. He wanted to know if we'd keep my condo. He wanted to know whether it was in only my name. When I asked why, he laughed and said, "Relax, Nat, Mom's just worried you'll forget where you came from." The next week my mother called with another one of her soft-voiced requests. We should all sit down after the wedding and discuss the future. Family planning. Protection. If anything ever happened, your father and I shouldn't be left vulnerable. What does that mean? I asked. It means assets should stay in the family. I remember standing at my kitchen island, one hand flat against the quartz, staring at the city lights beyond my windows as if the answer might be written there. Adrian is my family, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. When she spoke again, her voice had hardened. Don't get sentimental. Marriage changes people. That was when I hired Miranda Shaw. Miranda was a partner at Carrington Hale LLP, silver-streaked hair, dark suits with knife-clean lines, and the kind of composure that made other people start talking too much. She specialized in financial misconduct, fiduciary disputes, coercion cases, white-collar exposure. We'd worked across a few client matters before, and I trusted her because she never wasted words or kindness. I met her at her office on Wacker Drive one rainy Thursday. The reception area smelled faintly of lemon polish and espresso. I handed her a blue binder thick enough to bruise someone. She read for 20 minutes without interrupting me. When she finished, she closed the binder gently and said, "They're not just taking money. They're building leverage." I knew she was right. My family had grown accustomed not just to the transfers, but to the shape of me that made them possible. Dependable Natalie. Productive Natalie. Guilty Natalie. The daughter who would rather overpay than disappoint. The more stable I became, the more entitled they acted. And as the wedding got closer, their tone changed. Less gratitude. More assumption. My mother began referring to my money as what we all sacrifice. My father asked whether Adrian's parents would contribute commensurately. Ryan joked that weddings were great liquidity events. So Miranda and I made a plan. We didn't confront them immediately. We let them move. Let them become confident. Let them document themselves. Miranda brought in a private investigator, Julian Price, former forensic auditor turned licensed investigator, who looked like he belonged in a university lecture hall until you watched him ask a question and realized he missed nothing. He traced Ryan's LLC filings, vendor relationships, lease documents, and the bridge loans my father had guaranteed using outdated property valuations. He found text messages through a voluntary production from Ryan's ex-girlfriend, Chloe Bennett, who had once done bookkeeping for Blackbird Social and had grown tired of being blamed for missing cash. According to Chloe, my mother had referred to my monthly transfers as Natalie's obligation, and once said in writing, "After the wedding, we'll sort the condo issue and finally secure something for Ryan." That sentence was a match held to dry paper. So I did not cut off the money. I let the transfers continue. I wanted the pattern intact. I wanted the timeline unbroken. Most of all, I wanted them to show me how far they were willing to go. On the Monday before my wedding, my mother emailed a family attorney in St. Louis named Gerald Nance. She copied my father and I read it once, then again, and then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the precision was obscene. $94,000 was almost exactly what I had transferred them. They were going to flip my own money into a debt and present it as family sacrifice. Miranda called me back at 11:24. "Don't react," she said. "I'm not reacting. You're very quiet." "That's how I react." She let that sit for a moment. Then in the same tone one might use to order dry cleaning, she said, "Good. Let them bring it to the wedding." So on my wedding day, in that suite with the silk dress clinging cool against my skin and the scent of gardenia and hairspray turning slightly metallic in the air, when my mother slapped that envelope onto the vanity, none of it was new to me. What was new was the audience. Maya knew enough to stand still. My makeup artist, Lena, looked at me in the mirror with one eye wide and one hand still holding a sponge. My wedding coordinator, Celine Ortiz, had stopped in the doorway with a clipboard tucked to her chest. And behind my mother, peering in from the hall with shameless curiosity, was my Aunt Denise in dove-gray chiffon, phone halfway raised as if she hoped to catch the implosion in high definition. My mother drew a breath through her nose and lifted her chin. "You have 10 minutes before guests begin seating. Sign the acknowledgement, agree to the trust transfer after the honeymoon, and this stays private." Ryan took the toothpick from his mouth and smirked at me in the mirror. "Honestly, Nat, this is cleaner for everyone." My father did not look at me. He kept his eyes on the envelope. That told me everything. "What exactly stays private?" Maya asked, voice flat. My mother turned on her instantly. "This is a family matter." "No," I said quietly. "It became a legal matter on Monday." My mother's eyes snapped back to mine. That was the first crack. She recovered quickly. "Don't start with the corporate language. Sign the document." "And if I don't?" She smiled. It was a beautiful smile from a distance, all polished teeth and practiced warmth. Up close it was thin as a blade. "Then I tell Adrian. I tell his parents. I tell every guest downstairs that the elegant daughter they're all celebrating let her elderly parents fund her life and then tried to erase the debt the moment she found a richer family." Ryan folded his arms. "Imagine how that sounds in the middle of cocktail hour." My father cleared his throat. "Natalie, don't make this uglier than it needs to be." There was the family phrase for surrender. I looked down at the envelope, then back at my reflection. The half-finished bride in ivory silk. My mother in emerald satin with one hand pressed to the vanity. Ryan by the window, all performance and appetite. My father stiff in his tuxedo, sweat gathering at his temples under the hot mirror bulbs. Aunt Denise hovering in the hall like a scavenger at the edge of a field. They had arranged themselves around me with such confidence, so certain I would fold to keep the day intact, that for a second the room felt almost tender in its predictability. I picked up the envelope, slid the document halfway out, and let my eyes move across the forged debt line by line as if I were seeing it for the first time. Cream paper. Gerald Nance's letterhead. A signature block left open for me. An attached schedule referencing historical family support. Someone had even used legal taps. Then I placed the paper back inside, set the envelope down, reached for the crystal water glass on the vanity and took a slow sip. My mother's nostrils flared. Natalie. I turned slightly toward Celine in the doorway. Would you give us the room for 30 seconds? She hesitated. Stay close, I said. She nodded once and stepped back, taking Lena with her. Maya did not move. My mother gave a short laugh. You don't get to direct this. I looked at her in the mirror. Actually, I do. The silence landed heavily. Ryan straightened away from the window. What is that supposed to mean? It means, I said, setting the glass down with care, you should stop calling my transfers loans. My father's head jerked up. My mother blinked once. Just once. But it was enough. I reached for my phone on the vanity, unlocked it and opened a folder labeled Comfort Fund. My screen lit my hands in cold white. For the last 48 months, I said, I've transferred exactly $2,000 on the first of every month into the account ending in 4482. The account Mom renamed Comfort Fund. Total contributions as of this month, $96,000. Ryan scoffed too fast. That proves nothing. It proves the number in your forged debt acknowledgement is off by $2,000. My mother's voice sharpened. Forged. Yes. I scrolled. As I paid for my own college. I paid the down payment on my condo. And Adrian and I paid for this wedding. You know that. Which means the only $94,000 figure in circulation is the money I sent you. You just reversed the direction and hoped I'd be too embarrassed to call it what it is. My father stepped away from the door. Natalie, lower your voice. I laughed softly. Why? We were about to make this public. I turned the phone toward Maya first, then toward my mother. On the screen were the transfers month after month, each tagged from my account. The earliest memo lines. The repeating auto-transfer authorizations. The dates. The totals. My mother didn't even look at Maya. She was staring at the screen as if she could will it blank. That is support, she said. Support given out of love. We never denied that. I tapped once more. Page 3 of your Missouri property tax relief application. Outside financial support. No. Then another tap. Page 4. Ryan listed as residing in the family home. Ryan's face changed first. The color didn't leave it. I met her eyes in the mirror. How dare you build a fraud file on your daughter during her engagement? Ryan took a step toward me. Maya shifted before I did, just enough to place herself between us. She was 5'4" in pale blue silk and looked calm enough to negotiate a hostage release. Move, Ryan snapped. No, Maya said. I kept scrolling. Here's June 4th, I said. My transfer arrives at 8:03 a.m. At 8:17, $800 goes to Dad's pharmacy. At 9:02, $600 goes toward the mortgage. At 11:31, $600 goes to Blackbird Social. That afternoon Blackbird pays Meridian Residential Leasing. Here's July. Same pattern. August. Same pattern. September. Same pattern. My father's mouth opened and closed once before sound came out. Ryan said he was making payroll. So you lied for him. We protected family, my mother snapped. No, I said. You invoiced me. My Aunt Denise, still lurking in the doorway, lowered her phone by an inch. That was when I knew the room had turned. Not because anyone apologized. People like my family didn't apologize in real time. But because they had expected heat and got documentation. They had expected panic and got sequence. Panic can be argued with. Sequence cannot. My mother lifted her chin higher. Even if Ryan needed help, that changes nothing. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. If we decided family assets should be secured for all our children, that is our right. I nodded once. That's the first revelation. Her brows pulled together. What? I opened another folder. The second is that Gerald Nance's office sent a metadata stamped draft on Monday showing the debt acknowledgement was created 43 minutes after you uploaded my transfer history to his shared folder. Which means the document was built around my money, not yours. Ryan whispered, Mom. She ignored him. The third, I continued, is that the person who gave me Blackbird's internal ledgers also gave me screenshots of your messages. That landed hard enough that even my father looked at Ryan. I pulled up the first screenshot and read it aloud. From Elaine Mercer to Chloe Bennett, February 14, 9:08 p.m. Don't worry about Natalie. She'll keep paying. After the wedding we'll get the condo issue settled and Ryan won't have to scramble anymore. Ryan's voice cracked. Chloe did not send you that. I turned the phone toward him. She sent 112 of them. The room contracted. You could feel it. Like walls drawing closer. Ryan backed up until the window drape touched his shoulder. My father sank into the chair he'd been gripping and sat there staring at the carpet as if the pattern might rescue him. My mother remained standing because sitting would have looked like defeat, but something in her face had gone tight and papery around the mouth. You went through my messages, she said, and for the first time there was strain in it. No, I said. The woman your son blamed for his missing cash sent them voluntarily after he tried to pin vendor fraud on her. Ryan made a sound I can only describe as a dry choke. That is not what happened. Would you like me to read the QuickBooks notes too? He looked at my father. My father looked at the floor. My mother took one step toward me. You vindictive little. Careful, Maya said quietly. My mother stopped. I let a beat pass. Let the implications settle over the room. Then I set my phone down and smoothed one hand over the silk at my waist. Here's what happens next, I said. You go downstairs. You sit where you were assigned. You smile for the ceremony. You do not mention debts, loans, trusts, family sacrifice, or my condo to anyone in this building. On Monday at 9 a.m., you will be at Carrington Hale in Chicago with separate counsel if you prefer. Miranda Shaw will walk you through the exposure tied to false hardship filings, forged financial instruments, and attempted coercion on the day of a private event. If you aren't there, the package we prepared goes where it needs to go. Ryan stared at me. You prepared a package. I held his gaze. Months ago. My mother's composure finally slipped. Not shattered. He was too disciplined for that. But it fissured. You set us up. I thought about that. About the transfers. The calls. The guilt. The years of shrinking myself into someone endlessly useful. Then I shook my head. No, I said. I let you continue. My father rubbed one hand over his face. Natalie, please. That word from him had always once been enough to bring me back into line. When I was 14 and wanted to leave early for a debate tournament instead of helping host Ryan's birthday party. When I was 19 and refused to co-sign his first car loan. When I was 26 and said no to paying his overdue taxes. Please always meant perform peace so the rest of us don't have to feel ashamed. I felt none of that now. You wanted to corner me in a silk dress with my guests downstairs and a forged debt in your hand, I said. Don't ask for grace as if you brought any. Ryan tried for swagger and missed by miles. This won't hold up. Family transfers aren't crimes. Extortion documents can be. My mother closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them and reached for the last weapon she had. If Adrian hears any of this, he'll run. Men like him don't marry into mess. I almost smiled. Adrian already knows. The silence hit like a dropped curtain. My father looked up so sharply the chair creaked under him. Ryan's mouth actually fell open. My mother's expression went blank in that dangerous way some people go blank when they are recalculating everything they thought they understood. I picked up the envelope again and pressed it back into her hands. Go sit down, I said. Ryan left first, brushing past Aunt Denise so hard her phone hit the doorframe. My father rose slowly, older in that moment than I had ever seen him, and avoided my eyes as he opened the door. My mother was last. She paused at the threshold, one hand on the polished brass plate, and said without turning, "You're humiliating your family on your wedding day." I glanced at my reflection one more time, then back at her. "No," I said. "I'm getting married." When the door shut behind them, Maya let out the breath she'd been holding in a soft rush. Lena stepped back in with trembling hands and powder on her sleeve. Celine appeared with a look that asked everything and said nothing. "Do we need security?" Celine asked. "Not unless they forget themselves," I said. Maya set the bouquet in my lap and crouched in front of me, searching my face. "Are you okay?" I thought of the spreadsheet. The folders. The months. The absurdity of being in an ivory gown while discussing coercion and metadata. Then I smiled. "I am now." The ceremony happened under a glass atrium washed in late afternoon light. White florals climbed the aisle in soft clouds. A string quartet moved through Debussy while guests turned in their seats to look at me. My mother sat in the second row because I had quietly changed the seating chart after Monday's email. She held her posture so rigidly she looked carved. My father kept his eyes forward. Ryan checked his phone twice until an usher asked him to stop. Adrian was waiting beneath the arch, one hand loosely folded over the other, the edges of his smile visible even from halfway down the aisle. Behind him, his mother Vivian Cole sat in dove silk with the unruffled expression of a woman who had heard everything an hour earlier in a private room and responded by saying, "How tiresome for them," before asking whether I preferred the champagne opened now or after photographs. When I reached Adrian, he leaned in just enough to murmur, "You look terrifyingly beautiful." I felt the first real warmth of the day move through me. "Good," I whispered. "That feels accurate." We married under glass and soft music while my family sat still and swallowed their own script. At the reception, I danced with Adrian, ate exactly 3 bites of sea bass, and toasted with people who loved us without invoice language attached. I watched my mother work the room with brittle elegance, watched Ryan hover near the bar, watched my father age decade by decade under the ballroom chandeliers. No one made a scene. No one mentioned debts. No one said the word family like a threat. Just before midnight, as the last guests drifted toward the terrace and the band shifted into something slower, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "You've made a serious mistake." A second one arrived before I could lock the screen. "Monday won't go the way you think." I archived both without replying. They thought they had found my pressure point in white satin and public optics, but they had no idea Monday was never about convincing them. It was about giving them one final chance to understand how completely I had already seen them. The Carrington Hale conference room on the 31st floor smelled like cedar polish and expensive paper. Floor-to-ceiling windows cut the Chicago skyline into clean geometric panes, silver morning light washing across the walnut table and the black leather chairs lined along it with military precision. The room did not need to announce authority. It was built into the materials. I arrived at 8:42 in a charcoal suit, hair in a low knot, coffee in one hand, a slim black portfolio in the other. Miranda was already there, arranging binders by seat with her assistant Tessa. Julian stood by the window flipping through a tabbed packet. He looked up as I entered and gave me a brief nod. "Any surprises?" I asked. "Only the predictable ones," Miranda said. "Your mother requested everyone sit together, as a family unit." I did nothing. That was the role we had agreed on. Miranda would present. Julian would authenticate. I would speak when silence had done enough work. Miranda clicked a remote. The screen at the end of the room came alive with a clean title slide. Comfort Fund Timeline. January 2022 to September 2025. Ryan muttered, "Jesus." "Correct," Miranda said without looking at him. "The total is close." He advanced. Month by month the transfers appeared. Dates. Amounts. Account numbers partially redacted. On the right side of each slide, outflows. Pharmacy. Mortgage. Blackbird Social. Meridian Residential. Vehicle Services Midwest. Vendor wires. Event taps. The structure repeated with such ruthless consistency that it no longer felt like a family argument. It felt like an audit finding. Ms. Mercer transferred $2,000 monthly for 48 months, Miranda said. $96,000 total. We are not claiming every dollar was misused. We are claiming Ms. Mercer was told these funds were necessary for her parents' comfort and care while material portions were redirected to Mr. Ryan Mercer's business and lifestyle. My father shifted in his chair. We helped our son. Miranda nodded. With your daughter's money, while denying outside support on state relief filings. Slide change. The Missouri application appeared on screen, boxes enlarged and highlighted in red. My mother's jaw tightened. Gerald Nance leaned toward her and whispered something she ignored. Miranda continued. Page 3, filed April 12, 2024, states no outside financial support. Page 4 lists Ryan Mercer as residing in the family home. We have independent verification that Mr. Mercer maintained a lease at Meridian Lofts during the same period. Julian placed a packet before Ryan's attorney. Lease copy, utility statements, parking invoices, and a delivery log. Tabs 8 through 12. Ryan stared at the packet as if it had materialized out of air. That proves where I lived, he said. Not fraud. It proves your mother signed a false declaration, Miranda replied. Stay with us. Slide change. A text message thread filled the screen. Elaine Mercer. Don't worry about Natalie. She'll keep paying. Elaine Mercer. After the wedding we'll get the condo issue settled. Elaine Mercer. Ryan needs something secured in his name before year-end. My mother's hand tightened around her handbag so hard the leather creased. These were obtained from Chloe Bennett, Miranda said, former bookkeeping support for Blackbird Social LLC. Ms. Bennett is prepared to testify to the flow of funds and to Mr. Ryan Mercer's attempt to backfill missing vendor gaps using anticipated transfers from the parental account. Ryan slammed a palm on the table. She stole from me. Julian finally spoke, voice mild. Actually, your QuickBooks logs show you altered vendor classifications after the fact. The access trail is in the appendix. The room went very still. Miranda advanced again. This time it was the forged debt acknowledgement side by side with my transfer schedule. The identical $94,000 figure glowed on both screens like a confession. We subpoenaed metadata from the draft path voluntarily preserved by shared folder access logs, Miranda said. The acknowledgement document was generated 43 minutes after transfer history was uploaded. It references no legitimate historical loan documents, no repayment ledger, no contemporaneous notes, and no evidence of original disbursement from the parents to Ms. Mercer. It is, in plain terms, constructed around her deposits. Gerald Nance sat forward abruptly. My office relied on client representations. Miranda turned to him at last. Then your office was used. You may wish to consider that before speaking again. That was the first fracture. My mother whipped toward Gerald. You said this was standard. He pulled back. I said if the underlying facts were true. You reviewed it. Based on what you provided. Ryan barked a laugh that sounded close to panic. So now it's all Mom. My father finally lifted his head. Stop. No one did. Miranda let them talk over each other for exactly 9 seconds before she said, not loudly, enough. Silence complied. Then she nodded to Julian. He distributed a thinner packet, cream stock clean tabs. These are vendor affidavits, he said. 3 of them. Each states Blackbird Social represented certain payments as investor-backed while simultaneously reporting cash shortfalls. The shortfalls align with months in which Natalie Mercer's transfers were delayed by 2 or more days. That pattern matters because it ties the parental support account to business continuity. Ryan stared at him. You talked to my vendors. Julian looked almost apologetic. They were surprisingly eager. My mother leaned toward me at last. You hired people to investigate your own family. I met her gaze. You drafted a property grab for your daughter's wedding day. Her voice thinned. It was protection. For Ryan. For all of us. No, I said. Just the son you never let fail honestly. The words hung in the room with a quiet of their own. My father closed his eyes. Ryan's lawyer cleared his throat. Let's assume, for argument's sake, there were miscommunications and some inappropriate paperwork. What exactly is your client seeking? Miranda slid a final document to the center of the table. 3 things. First, a signed retraction stating no loans were ever made by the parents to Ms. Mercer and that any suggestion otherwise was false. Second, a restitution agreement acknowledging $96,000 transferred, less documented parental medical and mortgage use, resulting in a reimbursable balance secured by the sale of certain non-exempt assets. Third, immediate written consent to preserve and disclose financial records if state or federal agencies inquire regarding the hardship filings or business misrepresentations. My mother let out a sharp breath. You want us to liquidate assets? Miranda's face did not change. I want my client compensated without the need for public filings. Consider it generosity. Ryan scoffed. Public filings. You'd never do it. It would humiliate all of you. That was when I finally leaned forward. The leather chair gave a soft sigh under my weight. I rested my hands on the table and looked directly at him. Ryan, I said quietly, you tried to extort me on my wedding day with a fake debt based on my own transfers. You used my money to pay for your apartment, your car, and your failing company while telling me Dad couldn't stand long enough to shop for groceries. Don't confuse my preference for privacy with fear of exposure. He opened his mouth. Closed it. I turned to my mother. You told Chloe I would keep paying. You discussed my condo like a retirement instrument. You built a lie detailed enough to require legal tabs. So let me be completely clear now. I do not care what this looks like. My mother's eyes shone suddenly, not with remorse but with fury held too tightly. You always did this. You always made yourself the clean one. I almost smiled because that complaint had followed me since childhood. When Ryan crashed cars I was rigid. When bills went missing I was cold. When stories changed I was unforgiving. The family translated accuracy into cruelty because it made evasion feel softer. No, I said. I just kept records. Miranda gave a small nod to Tessa, who placed another file on the table. This, Miranda said, is the unexpected part. She slid the file toward my mother first. Inside were affidavits from Chloe Bennett, Blackbird's former bookkeeper, and from Patricia Velez, the administrative assistant at Gerald Nance's office. Patricia had noticed the rushed document creation Monday night, the absence of source files, and the fact that my mother had pushed for same-day signature logistics tied explicitly to the wedding date. Patricia had not enjoyed being told to mind clerical tasks when she raised concerns. She had documented the exchange. My mother flipped through the first affidavit, then the second. Her face changed with each page. Patricia, she whispered. That girl. Gerald Nance went pale. Patricia signed a statement. She did, Miranda said. She was concerned your office could be implicated. He sat back hard enough that his chair wheels squeaked against the polished floor. Ryan reached for the second affidavit, read 2 lines and swore under his breath. Chloe's doing this because I broke up with her. Julian shook his head slightly. Ms. Bennett is doing this because you tried to put missing promotional expenditures on her login and because your mother promised her reimbursement that never came. My father looked at Ryan, then really looked at him, and something old and tired shifted in his face. How much? He asked. Ryan stared at him. What? How much did you take? Ryan's jaw worked. It wasn't taking. My father's voice rose for the first time. How much? No one moved. 38, Ryan said finally. Maybe 42. I don't know. It moved around. My mother jerked toward him. You told me it was temporary. You told me Natalie wouldn't notice. And you believed that. Because she never says no. I let that settle. Let my brother hear himself. Miranda folded her hands again. This is the point at which families often begin assigning individualized blame. You are free to do that later with separate counsel. For now, the question is whether you cooperate. Ryan looked at his lawyer. Can they actually bring criminal referrals? His lawyer answered more honestly than Ryan expected. They can make agencies very interested. My mother stared at me as if trying to decide whether I had become someone new or had simply stopped pretending. You wanted this, she said. All of it. The reveal. The humiliation. I thought of the bridal suite. The envelope. My father at the door. Ryan's toothpick. Her certainty. No, I said. I wanted you to see them. See what? The records. The messages. The timeline. I wanted you to sit in a room where the facts were arranged in order and no one could interrupt them. Miranda advanced one final slide. It was a single timeline stretching across the screen, starting with my first transfer in January 2022 and ending with the wedding day coercion attempt. Dates lined the bottom like nails in a board. Each key event marked in red. January 1, 2022, First Comfort Fund transfer. April 12, 2024. False hardship filing. February 14, 2025. Condo issue settled, text. September 22, 2025. Debt acknowledgement draft created. September 27, 2025. Wedding day signature demand. Premeditation looks different when forced into sequence. Smaller. Meaner. Harder to romanticize as family chaos. Ryan rubbed his bandaged knuckle faster and faster. I need a minute. His lawyer leaned in. You need to stop talking. My father's attorney turned a page, then another, and set his pen down with visible care. Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Mercer, from a risk perspective, I strongly recommend settlement. My mother laughed once, a dry sound. Of course you do. He met her gaze. Because if this leaves this room, you are not the sympathetic parents you seem to think you are. That was the second fracture. The third came from my father. He exhaled slowly as if the air itself had weight and said to no one in particular, we should have told her about Ryan. My mother stared at him. What? We should have told her. From the beginning. We were trying to help our son. We were hiding him. Ryan sat up straight. Don't make me the whole problem. My father turned on him with a fury so sudden the room jolted. You lived in a luxury building while I told her I couldn't afford physical therapy. Ryan flinched. I had spent years wondering whether my father knew the whole scope or simply chose not to ask. In that moment I got my answer. He had known enough. Not everything. Enough. Enough to stay quiet while my mother managed the narrative and Ryan burned through borrowed lives. My mother saw the shift too and panic sharpened her voice. Thomas. But it was too late. Once a family like ours starts losing coordination, it happens quickly. The story stops arriving in a single voice. Ryan leaned toward her. You're the one who wanted the condo. For security. For me. For all of us. He laughed harshly. You always say that when you mean me. She turned to him, eyes blazing. Because you needed help. Because you never let me fall. And look what you did with that. He shot back. At least I didn't build the fake debt. Gerald Nance muttered, I need that stricken from the record. Miranda looked at him. There is no record yet. There is only your afternoon if you make poor choices. I almost admired her. For the next 40 minutes, the room moved from outrage to arithmetic. That is often how these things end. Not in grand moral speeches but in calculations. What could be sold? What could be repaid? What had to be admitted? What could no longer be denied? My parents owned a lake cabin outside Osage Beach they had claimed for years was a burdensome old property with sentimental value and little market interest. Julian had already obtained current comps. The market interest was excellent. Ryan still had equity in a vehicle he liked to pose next to on social media. Blackbird's socials accounts receivable were modest but real. There were jewelry pieces my mother had purchased during the exact months she had told me prescription costs were crushing. Not enough to restore everything but enough to make a meaningful number appear. Miranda summarized the settlement in plain language. The cabin is listed within 10 business days. The Mercedes is surrendered or sold within 15. Mr. Ryan Mercer signs an acknowledgement of benefit received from diverted funds. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer sign the no-loan retraction and a non-disparagement clause. If proceeds and liquid assets cover the restitution balance, we stop there. If they do not, a repayment plan begins. If any one of you publicly misstates these facts or reattempts a claim against Ms. Mercer's assets, all preserved materials go out. My mother sat frozen. You'd ruin us. I looked at her calmly. You were comfortable with the idea. That landed cleanly. Ryan's attorney asked for a private caucus. Miranda granted 20 minutes. My family filed into the adjacent room with their lawyers, carrying binders they had not expected to need. Through the frosted glass panel I could see silhouettes shifting sharply, arms cutting the air, one shape pacing back and forth like a trapped animal. Miranda sipped coffee and reviewed notes. You all right? She asked. Yes. Do you want more? More what? She looked toward the frosted glass. Consequences. I considered the question honestly. It deserved that. I want clarity, I said. Consequences are just what clarity costs. She nodded as if that was the answer she had expected. When they returned, my mother looked smaller without actually taking up less space. Her lipstick had faded unevenly. My father's shoulders were bent. Ryan's anger had curdled into something jumpier and meaner. Gerald Nance did not look at anyone. My father's attorney spoke first. We will sign, subject to minor language review. Today, Miranda said. Yes. Ryan opened his mouth. My mother hissed, "Stop." I almost laughed. Paperwork arrived in stages. Retraction first. Then restitution. Then preservation consent. Pens were placed along the table with deliberate neatness. Tessa distributed signature tabs. The whole scene carried the quiet choreography of a closing, except no one in the room was acquiring anything except truth and loss. My father signed first. He read every page, eyes moving slowly, then wrote Thomas Edward Mercer in the same heavy hand that had once signed my report cards and Little League permission slips and the birthday cards that always said "proud of you, kiddo," even in years he hadn't really seen me. When he finished, he set the pen down carefully and stared at his own signature as if it belonged to a stranger. My mother held out longest. She flipped pages she had already read. Asked for definitions she understood. Objected to tone. Objected to wording. Objected to the implication of malice. Miranda answered each objection with the patience one reserves for weather. Finally, with everyone watching, my mother uncapped the pen, pressed her lips together, and signed Elaine Ruth Mercer in a hand so sharp it nearly cut the page. Ryan didn't sign so much as attack the paper. His signature looked like a heart monitor in distress. When it was done, Miranda gathered the documents into neat stacks and slid the copies to each counsel. "That concludes the settlement conference," she said. "Compliance deadlines begin now." No one moved immediately. They were waiting, I think, for something larger. For rage. For a speech. For the daughter they had known to either collapse into grief or soften into compromise. But I had spent too long preparing to waste the ending. I stood. The chair rolled back softly on the polished floor. Morning light had shifted while we were inside. The buildings outside the windows now gleamed bright and hard, the river below a strip of dull silver. My mother looked up at me with a hatred so tired it almost resembled sorrow. Was it worth it? I thought about the years. The money. The wedding morning. The way they had stood around me with an envelope and a timetable. Then I picked up my portfolio. "You always said family takes care of family," I said. "I finally learned that doesn't mean financing the version that feeds on me." No one answered. I left them there among the leather chairs and walnut shine and legal tabs, shrinking against the room they had helped build for themselves without ever understanding it. The next few weeks were quiet in the way demolition is quiet after the charges go off. The cabin hit the market by the following Thursday. It sold within 19 days to a physician from Kansas City who wanted the dock rights and paid cash. Ryan's car disappeared from his Instagram feed almost immediately. Blackbird Social, which had once described itself online as a disruptive force in hospitality strategy, went dark without announcement. My mother withdrew from her charitable guild luncheon committee after what she described to one friend as unpleasant misunderstandings. My father began physical therapy again, this time apparently paid for without speeches about sacrifice. Adrian and I went on our honeymoon to Madeira anyway. There are forms of recovery that do not feel dramatic while they are happening. A tiled balcony above the Atlantic. Coffee in thick white cups. Salt in the air. The weight of sunlight on bare shoulders. Adrian reading with one foot crossed over the other while I sat wrapped in a hotel robe and realized, somewhere between the third morning and the fifth, that my body had stopped waiting for impact. He never pressed me to process aloud. That was one of the reasons I loved him. He understood that silence can be a workshop, not a void. On the seventh night, watching the harbor lights smear gold across black water, he said, "You know you never had to prove anything to me." I looked at him over the rim of my wine glass. "I know. You still proved quite a lot." I smiled. Occupational hazard. When we got home to Chicago, the messages began. My mother favored long texts written in the tone of a woman composing history rather than participating in it. "I do not recognize the daughter who did this. You let outsiders shame your own blood. One day you will understand what parents endure." Then a week later the register shifted. "Your father isn't sleeping. This family has been broken by your stubbornness. I miss the version of you who still had a heart. Ryan was less elegant. Hope the money was worth it. You think you won. Miranda scared Mom half to death. You ruined my life over accounting. That last one made me laugh out loud in the elevator." My father sent only 2 messages. The first was an apology drafted so cautiously it sounded like he was crossing a frozen lake in dress shoes. The second came at 6:14 a.m. on a Sunday. "I'm sorry I let things go that far. I believed him, which did not mean I replied. I archived everything. That became its own ritual. Message arrives. Screen glows. Thumb presses. Not blocked. Not answered. Preserved. There was something deeply satisfying about refusing both performance and re-engagement. Silence used correctly is not passive. It is placement. It puts people where they belong. 6 months later, I was standing barefoot in a new kitchen with sunlight flooding across pale oak floors, waiting for my espresso machine to finish its low mechanical hiss. Adrian and I had moved into a loft in the West Loop with steel-framed windows and a balcony lined with rosemary planters that released scent whenever the wind moved through them. Morning there felt different from morning in my old condo. Lighter. Not because the past had vanished, but because it no longer lived under the skin of every ordinary thing. I carried my coffee to the balcony and stepped into a wash of spring sun. Below, the neighborhood was already waking. Delivery trucks. Dog walkers. A cyclist in a red jacket slicing through the intersection. The city had that clean, bright look it gets after rain, glass and steel reflecting back a world that seemed temporarily honest. This was the part of stories people often rush through because the climax has already happened. But aftermath is where justice proves whether it was real. My mother, who had spent years curating herself as the gracious center of every room, lost her standing by increments. It wasn't one public scandal. People like her survived those. It was whispers. Missed invitations. A guild board quietly declining to renew her committee leadership. A church friend learning there had been financial confusion, involving her daughter's support. Another discovering the lake cabin sale had not been the casual downsizing she claimed. Social status is often just confidence with good lighting. Once the lighting changed, so did she. My father retired earlier than planned. Whether by choice or pressure depended on who told the story. The firm where he had consulted on commercial construction did not appreciate inconsistencies surfacing around personal guarantee disclosures tied to Ryan's business loans. He was never charged with anything. But after years of being treated like a man of dependable judgment, even proximity to mess diminished him. Last I heard, he spent most mornings at physical therapy and most afternoons in their smaller condo, watching market news with the volume too high. Ryan's consequences were more visible and therefore to him more offensive. Blackbird Social dissolved. 2 vendors pursued him civilly for unpaid balances. One of the friends who had once appeared in his photos at rooftop bars stopped taking his calls after learning he had used family bridge funding to cover investor-facing expenses. The Meridian lease ended. The BMW vanished. He took contract work doing event logistics under someone else's name for a while, then apparently shifted into sales for a beverage distributor. According to Chloe, he hated it because no one cared about his vision and everyone cared about inventory. There was, I admit, a certain symmetry in that. Aunt Denise tried the nostalgia route. She sent me a photo of myself at 12 in a sequined recital costume and wrote, "Family should never become paperwork." Archived that too. Then she pivoted to indignation, then to concern, then to casual check-ins as though she had not nearly filmed my implosion in the bridal suite. My cousin Elena. Yes, another Elena, which had always made holidays slightly ridiculous, called one afternoon just to say, "For what it's worth, half the family suspected your mom was funneling money to Ryan, but no one realized she'd make a move at your wedding." That was ambitious. That's one word for it, I said. Elaborate. Reckless. Kind of insane. Better. She laughed softly. "You know everyone's terrified of you now." I looked out at the city from my office window where late light was turning the river bronze. Good. As I had changed offices too. 3 months after the settlement I left my firm. Not dramatically. Not with a speech. Just a resignation letter, a transition plan, and a new company incorporated 2 weeks later. Mercer Advisory Group. The name amused Adrian, who asked whether reclaiming the family surname felt triumphant or petty. Administrative, I said. The truth was more layered. The ordeal had clarified something I had sensed for years. I was very good at spotting patterns of financial manipulation, particularly the kind hidden inside relationships where obligation blurred consent. Family systems. Small business shells. Elder support narratives. Coerced gifting. Informal reimbursements that became extortion. Women called me after referrals from lawyers and therapists and quietly said things like, "I don't know if this counts as fraud because it's my brother," or, my parents say I owe them because they raised me, or, my husband has me paying his mother's rent and I can't tell where the money is actually going. I knew that language now. I knew how shame disguises itself as duty. I knew how numbers, arranged carefully, can hand people back their own reality. So I built a practice around that. Nothing huge at first. A corner office with matte black shelves, a glass conference room, one associate, one admin, and a waitlist longer than I expected. By the second quarter, I had 3 retained matters involving coerced family transfers and 2 involving founder misappropriation dressed up as loyalty. Word travels fast when it offers people a vocabulary they've been missing. One Friday morning, maybe 8 months after the wedding, Chloe Bennett met me at Siri's Cafe for coffee. The place smelled like dark roast and toasted bread, and sunlight from the front windows struck the brass fixtures in warm strips. Chloe had cut her hair shorter since the Blackbird days. She looked steadier now, less like someone bracing for blame. We had not started as friends. She had been, technically, on the other side. Ryan's girlfriend, then Ryan's ex, then Ryan's reluctant bookkeeper, then my unexpected witness. But shared clarity creates strange loyalties. We had spent enough hours comparing ledgers and reconstructing timelines that affection had room to grow. She slid into the booth, set down her oat milk latte and grinned. "You will not believe who I saw yesterday." I leaned back. "Please tell me this ends badly for Ryan." "It ends in a polo shirt." I smiled despite myself. "Go on." He was in a Mariano's parking lot unloading branded coolers from a distributor van. Name tag. Clipboard. Sunburn on one side of his face. He saw me, pretended not to, then almost dropped a case of sparkling yuzu water. I laughed then, a Rayal laugh, warm and unforced. "That is extremely specific karma. It gets better." He tried to tell someone on the phone he was in territory management. Of course he did. Chloe lifted her cup in a tiny salute. To territory. We clinked coffee lids. That was the thing about surviving a story like mine. It didn't leave you empty. It left you edited. The people who remained had passed through fire and evidence and still chosen the truth. Maya, who had not flinched when Ryan moved toward me in the bridal suite. Adrian, who heard every ugly detail and responded by asking what support looked like, not whether the marriage should pause. Miranda, who sent me referrals now with one-line notes like sharp client. Don't let her undercharge. Chloe, who had once been an accessory to Ryan's mythology and became one of the few people who understood precisely how it collapsed. The communication attempts never fully stopped. On our first anniversary, my mother left a voicemail at 11:03 p.m. "I miss you," she said, voice soft in a way that might have moved me years earlier. "The family isn't the same. Holidays feel wrong. Your father barely talks. Ryan is trying, whether you care to believe that or not. I don't know what you think you've won, Natalie, but there's no prize for sitting alone with your principles." I listened to it once while standing in my office after hours, the skyline outside dark and stippled with office lights. Then I saved the audio to a folder labeled Mercer Archive and went home to Adrian, who was making pasta and singing badly to old jazz records. He was right about one thing. The family wasn't the same. That was the prize. A few weeks later, Maya came over on a Saturday afternoon with pastries from Floreal and a gossip update delivered the way she did everything. Neatly, efficiently, with devastating effect. "Denise told my mother," she said, unfolding herself onto our sofa, "that your mom keeps introducing the condo building as temporary whenever someone asks where they moved." Adrian set a plate of apricot tarts on the coffee table. "Temporary for how long?" Maya took a bite. "Until reality becomes negotiable again, apparently." I shook my head. "That may take a while." "She also heard your mother tried to imply you were manipulated by lawyers." Adrian handed me tea. "An old favorite." Maya smiled. "No one bought it. Too many people remember the wedding." "You were very serene." "That's a kind word for it." "It's the right word. There is an intimacy in being accurately seen after you have spent years being strategically misunderstood." I didn't realize how hungry I was for that until I had it. That evening, after Maya left and the apartment settled into its softer sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rush of tires on wet pavement, Adrian turning pages in the armchair, I stood by the window and watched the city soften into dusk. The sky over the West Loop was turning orange at the edges, glass buildings catching the light and holding it a few seconds longer than they should. Down on the street, headlights came on one by one, patient and inevitable. A year had passed since the bridal suite. Or no. Sometimes people imagine revenge as heat. Explosion. A slammed door. A raised voice. But the most complete endings I've known arrived cooler than that. They arrived in folders. In timestamps. In signatures placed exactly where they had to go. They arrived in the private terror on a manipulator's face when they realized the version of you they built their plans around no longer existed. That autumn, Chloe came with Adrian and me to a rooftop bar in Fulton Market for my 35th birthday. The terrace was wrapped in amber string lights, and the city beyond us looked almost liquid, towers glowing against a bruised blue sky. The air smelled like cedar smoke from the outdoor heaters and citrus from someone's cocktail nearby. Chloe wore a black wool coat and laughed more easily than I'd ever heard her laugh in the years she'd been orbiting Ryan's chaos. At one point she leaned on the railing beside me and said, "I still think about the look on his face when he realized you had the texts." I smiled into my drink. "I think about your face when you sent them." She laughed. "Honestly, I was scared." "I know. I kept thinking your mom would talk her way out of it. She always sounded so sure. Like if she said a thing in the right tone, reality would rearrange."